So in both this portrait by George Gower and in the portrait miniature you've got there, we see in the top left corners imprese. And imprese were a combination of images and text which were included to intrigue and perplex the Elizabethan viewer. So why don't we start with yours? Is that a sunburst?
Yeah, so impresa were a combination of word and image, and here in gold there's a French motto which means I will brighten, and then this wonderful sunburst in gold paint as well. Unfortunately, we don't know who the sitter was in this image. If we did, we would know whose day he was trying to brighten with his beautiful face, but sadly he's unknown. But I think in your case, we do know who the sitter was in this portrait, and this curious figure here, moustached man. It looks like a sort of Sagittarian symbol. So is this his star sign, or?
We think almost certainly, yeah. Well, I mean, as you know, it's all part of the fun with these, is that you're never really supposed to know for certain what is going on. They purposely ask more questions than they give answers to. But yeah, we think this is probably a reflection of the artist's zodiac sign. He was presumably a Sagittarius. The Elizabethans, of course, were obsessed with astrology. But it's also, anyone who was viewing this portrait would have known that this centaur would have represented the figure of Chiron, who within Greek mythology was the tutor of Achilles. So it's really a comment on our subject's intellect. And of course, also as a centaur, he possessed human but also beast-like qualities. He could show compassion, but also strength and lust. And of course, as an archer, Chiron never missed his target.
So it's a sort of subtle way of saying, I'm really clever, I'm really handsome, which of course he is, and it's all in this sort of nutshell up here. And what about the inscription here?
We have this Latin inscription which roughly translates to "No one respires who does not aspire." And aspirat is also a pun, it's a play on words. It's taken to mean both respire, as in to breathe, but also aspire. And what we're being told here is a life without aspiration is not a life lived.
So it's really interesting to see that that these mottos, these imprese, are in oil paintings and portrait miniatures. And of course, portrait miniatures are the private type of portrait. So there's no heraldic inscription here. I mean, there's a lot more information on this painting than there is in this miniature. So when people arrived at this person's house, they would have read this in a way that we can't really read it now, presumably.
Yes, this would have been a painting that would have hung on the wall, and this would have been a sort of instruction for anyone who viewed it. Whereas I suppose with your miniature, this played into this idea of secrecy with portrait miniature, wasn't it?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It wasn't as bold as this, but it was more intended for a more private audience.
Yeah, and quite often the impresa in portrait miniatures would literally have only been able to have been read by the person it was given to, the recipient. So I think that's why perhaps they're more complex and difficult to understand in portrait miniatures, whereas here it's like almost like an open book on the character of the sitter. You've got his lineage, his star sign, his age, and an inspirational quote to read every day.
And it's these sort of little mysteries and intrigues that is one of the defining characteristics of portraiture in both big and small from this period.